Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are jumping right into a pretty incredible account of ancient political rivalry, opportunistic murder, and honestly, a truly unexpected pursuit of justice. We're unpacking a story where power is completely up for grabs, and the line between loyalty and betrayal, well, it gets tested in blood. If you've ever wondered how ancient leaders navigated the incredibly messy, often violent transition of power, this narrative offers an absolute masterclass in the sheer unpredictability of royal ethics. We're going to look closely at the fall of a man named Ishbosheth, but even more importantly, we're going to analyze how his greatest rival reacted to his sudden, violent end.
I want you to consider this dramatic question right off the bat. How do you reward the men who kill your greatest rival? I mean, in the ancient world, the playbook was usually pretty straightforward, right? If you eliminated the boss's enemy, you secured the ultimate promotion. You expected royal favor, wealth, a prominent seat at the table. Opportunistic betrayal was, practically speaking, a viable career path, assuming, of course, you picked the winning side. So keep this expectation in your head, because it's exactly what two captains in our story were banking on when they committed a truly brutal act.
Section 1. A Kingdom in Turmoil.
Okay, let's dive into this and really set the scene. The house of Saul, the former king, is completely crumbling. Saul's son, Ishbosheth, is desperately attempting to hold on to power. But a massive shift has just occurred. His top general, and really his main source of military strength, Abner, has just died in Hebron. And with Abner gone, Ishbosheth is paralyzed by fear. The text literally tells us his hands became feeble and all the Israelites were troubled. The power vacuum is widening fast. But Ishbosheth isn't the only vulnerable member of this lineage. Jonathan, another of Saul's sons, had a child named Mephibosheth, and the source notes this incredibly tragic detail. When Mephibosheth was just 5 years old, news of his father and grandfather's deaths arrived from Jezreel. His nurse, panicking and in her haste to flee with the boy, actually dropped him, leaving him permanently lame in his feet. So the entire royal family is quite literally stumbling. Meanwhile, two of Ishbosheth's own men, Baanah and Rechab, captains of bands and Benjamites, are watching all this weakness unfold. The stage is perfectly set for opportunistic men to strike right from within.
Section 2. The Ultimate Betrayal. Now, this is where the story takes a grisly, almost true crime sort of turn. Seeing their leader's grip on power slipping, Baanah and Rechab decide to completely abandon any semblance of loyalty. And remember, they aren't foreign invaders, they're insiders. They're looking to curry favor with the rising star King David by delivering him the ultimate prize, the total elimination of Saul's dynasty. Let's walk through this timeline step by step to see exactly how these captains plotted and executed their move. So it's midday, the heat of the day. Ishbosheth is resting on his bed. He's in his own home, a place that should absolutely be secure. Shortly after, Baanah and Rechab use their insider access to sneak right into the midst of the house. Their cover story? They act as though they're just there to fetch wheat. Casual, right? But once inside, they move straight to the bedchamber. The assassination is swift, and it is brutal. They smite him under the fifth rib, slay him, and then behead him right there on his bed. Once the deed is done, they grab his head and flee through the plain all night long, making their escape to claim what they think is their prize. Section 3. Expecting a Royal Reward.
So, after traveling all night, the assassins arrive in Hebron and present this severed head to King David, and they are expecting to be hailed as absolute heroes. They tell David, "Behold the head of Ishbosheth the son of Saul, thine enemy, which sought thy life." They even go so far as to frame their treacherous, cold-blooded murder as an act of divine justice, claiming the Lord had avenged the king that day against Saul and his seed. But there is a massive disconnect here. Now, what's really interesting about this is how completely Baanah and Rechab misunderstood their king's core values. They expect royal favor and celebrate their victory. But David's reality? It's one of utter disgust and righteous fury. He immediately classifies their act not as some brilliant strategic military victory, but as wicked. And this is a totally crucial moment for analyzing David's response to betrayal. He completely rejects the political norm that a convenient outcome justifies a treacherous act. He outright refuses to accept that assassinating a rival in his sleep is anything but pure evil.
Section 4. David's shocking verdict.
To really understand David's fury here, we have to look at his well-documented track record of dealing with people who attempt to profit from betrayal. He doesn't just judge Baanah and Rechab in a vacuum. He draws on a direct precedent from his own past. He reminds the assassins of a prior incident in Ziklag. Back then, a messenger came to David claiming to bring good tidings of Saul's death, fully expecting a massive reward. And David's verdict? He took hold of him and slew him right there in Ziklag. David maintains a strict, zero-tolerance policy for opportunistic murder.
He simply refuses to incentivize betrayal. So when we look at Hebron, where Baana and Rahab have actively murdered Ishbosheth and are now standing there with their hands out expecting a promotion, well, based on that Ziklag precedent, their verdict is going to be severe.
David speaks to them directly, and his words carry a chilling, unmistakable weight. He says, "How much more, when wicked men have slain a righteous person in his own house upon his bed, shall I not therefore now require his blood of your hand and take you away from the earth?" So the crucial point here is David's profound disgust at the nature of the crime. It's almost unbelievable given the brutal norms of the era, but his moral code is ironclad. Ishbosheth wasn't killed on a battlefield in fair combat. He was slain in his own bedchamber, in his own house. David labels the assassins as wicked men, and Ishbosheth, relatively speaking in this specific context, as a righteous person who did not deserve a coward's death. David demands an absolute reckoning for this blood.
Section 5. The price of treachery.
Baana and Rechab thought they were playing the political game perfectly, but they fundamentally misread the man sitting on the throne. The price they pay for their treachery is absolute, and it is brutally instructive to everyone who witnesses it. The source outlines exactly how methodically this punishment was carried out. First, execution. David commanded his young men, and they slew the two brothers. Second, mutilation. They cut off their hands and their feet, literally the very hands that committed the murder and the feet that ran to bring the news. Third, public display. They hanged the bodies up over the pool in Hebron. And this brilliantly illustrates how David made a permanent, undeniable public example of what happens to traitors. He broadcast to the entire nation that his kingdom, his rule, will absolutely not be built on a foundation of covert assassinations and internal betrayal.
But the narrative doesn't end just with the punishment of the guilty. It ends with a really specific, poignant note about the victim. The text tells us, "But they took the head of Ishbosheth and buried it in the sepulchre of Abner in Hebron." This perfectly contrasts the brutal fate of the assassins with David's final act of respect toward his fallen rival. By giving Ishbosheth's head a proper burial alongside his loyal general Abner, David cements his strict code of honor. He restores a measure of dignity to Saul's house, even in absolute defeat.
Which brings us to a powerful conclusion. We've seen a kingdom in turmoil, a shocking betrayal, and a king who refused to compromise his principles for political convenience. So, I want to leave you with this question to chew on. When navigating power, does true leadership mean accepting any advantage, or does it demand strict moral justice even when betrayal benefits you? David's intense reaction to the men who literally handed him the kingdom on a silver platter forces us to rethink what it truly means to lead with honor. Thanks so much for exploring this complex piece of history with us, and we'll see you next time.